Stop thinking about the megalodon. Forget about the mosasaurus. Long before dinosaurs ruled the land or giant sharks patrolled the open ocean, the dark waters of Earth belonged to a monster far more terrifying. It did not kill you with teeth, because it had no teeth. It killed with sheets of bone as sharp as razor blades, operating with the mechanical precision of an industrial guillotine. It was encased in armor so thick that conventional weapons would have been useless against it. It possessed a bite force capable of crushing solid rock, yet it could strike with a speed so fast it created a vacuum that tore the water apart. This is Dunkleosteus. It was not just a fish. It was the first biological tank nature ever built, the creature that taught every other living thing the true meaning of fear. Welcome to the Age of Fish, where the top of the food chain was not occupied by an animal, but by a machine of destruction. To understand the sheer horror that Dunkleosteus represented, we must travel back in time 360 million years to the Devonian Period. Scientists often call this the Age of Fish, but that name sounds far too peaceful for the reality of the era. The ocean of this time was a bloody battlefield of evolutionary testing. Vertebrates were trying to figure out the most efficient design for killing, and the most successful group of animals at the time was not the sharks or the bony fish we know today, but the placoderms. These were the armored fish. Their heads and chests were encased in rigid, interlocking plates of bone, creating a biological helmet that was virtually impenetrable. Among these armored warriors, Dunkleosteus was the undisputed emperor. The story of its discovery began in 1867, along the shores of Lake Erie in Ohio. An amateur geologist named J. Terrell found massive, blackened skull fragments jutting out of the shale cliffs. They looked less like fossils and more like the wreckage of an ironclad ship. He originally called it the terrible fish. It took nearly a century for it to be formally named Dunkleosteus, honoring David Dunkel, a museum curator who dedicated his life to studying them. These fossils are not just bones. They are a warning from the past about an era when the oceans were ruled by heavy metal giants. The environment these creatures inhabited was alien to us. The continents were clustered differently, forming the early stages of the supercontinent Pangaea. The seas were warm, shallow, and teeming with life that looked nothing like modern marine biology. There were vast reefs, not made of coral, but of sponges and stromatolites. Swimming through these alien forests were early ammonites, primitive sharks, and arthropods. But casting a shadow over all of them was the armored bulk of the placoderms. Dunkleosteus was a member of a specific subgroup called the arthrodyras, which means jointed neck. This anatomical feature is key to understanding its dominance. Most fish have a head that is fused to their shoulders, limiting their movement. But Dunkleosteus possessed a ball and socket joint, connecting its head armor to its body armor. This allowed it to lift its head, a simple motion that would unlock one of the most devastating feeding mechanisms in history. What made Dunkleosteus the ultimate nightmare of the ancient seas? The answer lies entirely in its mouth. If you look at the skull of a Dunkleosteus in a museum today, the first thing you notice are the terrifying fang-like projections on the upper and lower jaws. Most people assume these are teeth, but that is a fatal misunderstanding. Dunkleosteus did not have teeth in the biological sense. Teeth are separate structures made of dentin and enamel that grow out of the jaw. Instead, the jawbones of Dunkleosteus were extended and sharpened into 4 pairs of exposed bony plates. This was a stroke of evolutionary genius. Normal teeth can break, wear down, or fall out, but the bony plates of Dunkleosteus were self-sharpening. Every time the animal closed its mouth, the upper and lower plates sheared past each other like the blades of a pair of scissors. This friction continuously ground the edges against one another, ensuring that its weapons remained razor-sharp for its entire life. It was a biological knife that never went dull. As the animal aged and grew larger, its weapons only became more formidable. This structure allowed Dunkleosteus to deliver bite forces that are hard to comprehend. Scientific estimates suggest that at the tip of the beak, it could exert a force of 5,000 newtons. At the back of the blade, where the leverage was greatest, that force jumped to over 6,000 newtons, and potentially up to 7,400 newtons in the largest specimens. This is enough power to shear a prehistoric shark in half, pulverize the rock-hard shell of a giant ammonite, or punch through the armor of its own kind. It possessed a bite force rivaling that of a Tyrannosaurus rex or a Nile crocodile. However, because that immense force was concentrated onto a razor-thin edge rather than a blunt tooth, the pressure per square inch was astronomical. It did not just crush, it severed. It could slice through bone and shell as if they were wet paper. However, raw power was not its only weapon. In nature, there is usually a trade-off between force and speed. A heavy tank is usually slow. But Dunkleosteus broke this rule of physics thanks to a unique mechanism in its skull known as a 4-bar linkage. Its skull was not a solid, fused block like ours. It was composed of multiple plates connected by mobile joints. This system connected the skull, the shield around the neck, and the lower jaw. When the animal utilized the muscles attached to these joints, it triggered a chain reaction. As the head was lifted up by the neck muscles, the lower jaw automatically dropped down. This was not a simple opening of the mouth. It was a synchronized explosion of movement. When Dunkleosteus attacked, it threw its head back and dropped its jaw in just 1/50th of a second. To put that in perspective, that is faster than the blink of a human eye. This terrifying speed created a zone of negative pressure inside the mouth, generating a powerful vacuum. This is known as suction feeding. The prey was not just bitten, it was violently sucked into the mouth of the Dunkleosteus before it could even register a threat. Whether the victim was a fast-swimming fish or a hard-shelled invertebrate clinging to a reef, the rush of water would drag it helplessly into the guillotine. And then, the jaws would snap shut. While the opening phase was fast, the closing phase was powered by massive adductor muscles that delivered the crushing force. This dual-action mechanism, high-speed suction to capture the prey, followed by high-power compression to destroy it, made Dunkleosteus the most chemically perfect predator of its time. It solved the problem of hunting fast prey and the problem of eating armored prey simultaneously. For decades, the image of Dunkleosteus in books, documentaries, and museums has been consistent. We pictured it as a long, serpentine creature, a sort of armored eel stretching up to 10 meters in length. This reconstruction was based on comparing it to smaller, more slender placoderms. We assumed that because the head was huge, the body must be long and trailing. But modern science has redrawn the portrait of the king, and the truth is even more intimidating. The biggest problem with reconstructing Dunkleosteus is that we only have the head. The armored plates of the skull and thorax fossilize beautifully because they are bone. The rest of its skeleton, including the spine, tail, and fins, was made of cartilage, like a shark. Cartilage rots away quickly and rarely fossilizes. For a century, scientists had to guess the shape of the body based on the head. A groundbreaking study in 2017, reinforced by further detailed analysis in 2023, changed everything. By analyzing the proportions of the skull and comparing them to the relationship between head size and body shape, In hundreds of modern fish species, paleontologists proposed a radical new look. Dunkleosteus was likely much shorter and wider than previously thought. Instead of a 10-meter eel, it was likely only 4 to 5 meters long. But do not let this smaller length fool you. It was shorter, but it was thicker, denser, and far heavier. Imagine a giant armored tuna, or a swimming bean rather than an eel. It had a deep, robust body packed with muscle. This new reconstruction has been affectionately dubbed the chunky dunk by the internet. But biologically, it is a terror. A short, thick body is more hydrodynamically stable. It suggests that the animal was not a slow cruiser that undulating through the water. It was a burst swimmer. It was built for explosive power. It was a heavyweight brawler designed to launch itself like a battering ram. This new shape suggests a very active lifestyle. It would have had a powerful tail, likely with a large caudal fin, capable of generating immense thrust. This transforms Dunkleosteus from a mythical sea serpent into a realistic, physically efficient tank that dominated the water column with brute mass and sudden acceleration. It was the pit bull of the Devonian seas, compact and muscular, designed to overpower anything it collided with. In the ecosystem of the Devonian, Dunkleosteus sat at the absolute apex. Nothing ate it, but it ate everything. Fossils of food residue found associated with Dunkleosteus specimens, known as boluses, reveal a diet that was shockingly diverse. These regurgitated piles of indigestible material contain the remains of arthropods, primitive squid, and smaller placoderms. But its favorite meal might force us to rethink the natural order. At this time, sharks had already evolved. A primitive shark called Cladocellac swam in the same waters. It was a sleek, fast predator, the ancestor of the modern masters of the ocean. But in the Devonian, Cladocellac was not the apex predator. It was lunch. These fast, agile sharks frequently ended their lives in the stomach of the armored tank. Paleontologists have found shark remains that bear the distinctive shearing marks of Dunkleosteus' jaws. It was a reverse world where sharks swam in fear, fleeing from the shadow of the bony fish. The shark, which we consider the ultimate predator today, was merely a snack for the placoderms. But the diet of Dunkleosteus had a darker side. It was a cannibal. Paleontologists have found heavy Dunkleosteus skulls bearing deep, healed scars. These are not random scratches. They are distinctive gouges that match the bite of another Dunkleosteus perfectly. Even more disturbing, piles of regurgitated semi-digested bones have been found containing the fragmented, sheared skulls of juvenile Dunkleosteus. This suggests a violent, competitive existence. In a world where you are the strongest thing alive, the only enemy worthy of fighting you is yourself. They likely fought over territory, mates, or food resources. The young would have had to hide in the shallow reefs, staying out of the deep water where the adults patrolled, lest they be eaten by their own parents. It paints a picture of a species where violence was the primary language of interaction. Dunkleosteus and the placoderm lineage ruled the oceans for 60 million years. They were the pinnacle of biological engineering, the most successful vertebrates of their time. So why did they vanish? Why do we not see armored fish swimming in the Atlantic today? The answer lies in the Hagenberg event, one of the most mysterious and severe extinction events in Earth's history. Occurring at the end of the Devonian Period, about 359 million years ago. The exact cause is still debated, ranging from volcanic eruptions to asteroid impacts or rapid climate change. But the result was clear. The planet's environment shifted radically. Global temperatures dropped, glaciers formed, and sea levels fell. Most critically, oxygen levels in the ocean plummeted, creating widespread anoxia. This is where the heavy armor became a death sentence. Growing and moving a massive bone-covered body requires immense amounts of energy and oxygen. A metabolic engine like Dunkleosteus, designed for high-performance hunting, likely had a high oxygen demand. As the ocean suffocated, Dunkleosteus became a victim of its own magnificence. It was too big, too heavy, and too metabolically expensive to survive in a choking ocean. The very adaptations that made it a king, the armor, the massive jaws, the bulk, made it vulnerable when the rules of the game changed. Meanwhile, the sharks were smaller. They had no heavy bone armor. Their skeletons were made of light cartilage. They were lighter, faster, and required less oxygen to function. They were the underdogs, the scavengers, and the small game hunters. But they were efficient. They survived the suffocation. When the Devonian ended, the reign of the placoderms collapsed completely. Dunkleosteus went extinct, leaving no descendants. The entire class of placodermi was wiped from the face of the earth. Its disappearance created a massive power vacuum in the ocean, a void that allowed the surviving sharks to rise up, diversify, and eventually take the throne they hold today. If Dunkleosteus had not perished, the history of life in the sea might have looked completely different. Sharks might have remained eternal underdogs, forever hiding in the shadows of the armored giants. The extinction of the placoderms was the stroke of luck that gave us the modern ocean. Dunkleosteus serves as a brutal reminder of the impermanence of power. It was the perfect organism for its time, an unstoppable killing machine armed to the teeth. But in the evolutionary race, raw strength is not always the ultimate key. Flexibility and adaptability are the true victors. Today, when we stare at the fossilized skull of a Dunkleosteus, we see a monster from a nightmare. But we should also see a pioneer. It was the first creature to dare to be a giant, the first to turn its body into a weapon, and the architect of the concept of the apex predator that nature still uses today. If you were fascinated by the story of the ocean's first tank, make sure to subscribe to Extinct Echoes as we dive deeper into the mysteries of the past. And tell us in the comments, in a hypothetical fight, who do you think would win? The guillotine jaws of Dunkleosteus, or the speed and agility of a great white shark?